If you're anything like me, the events of the past week have just really caused me to take some time and to meditate. And I gotta tell you, it's more than one event. There have been so many things that have gone on in just the past couple months that have really caused me to stop and to pause and to try to understand, why do these things continue to happen? Right, we have everything from the murder of Charlie Kirk last week to Irina Zabluska, the Ukrainian immigrant who was stabbed riding a train in the United States. We had a school shooting in Evergreen High School in Colorado where just chaos was going about. There have been wars and abuse. We see these sex scandals all over the place. We see such civil unrest, and the discourse of people talking to one another has just taken such a dark turn in our world that sometimes it's just so hard to even process that people can just treat one another in such a ways. We've seen marriage and family issues just going constantly through our society, even reaching into the core of our church family here. To even when I saw on the news a couple days ago, as we've been watching through, that there were some kids who were locked in a storage unit in Milwaukee. We saw that the UN actually came together and had a vote to condemn Israel for conducting genocide on Gaza. Lord, there is just so much going on. How do we process it, and what do we do? And so I've been taking that cry to the Lord recently. With all the pain and the heartache and the hurt, what does God have to say about it? So as I've been contemplating these things, there's two things that came to mind that I wanted to share to you. And by the way, one of the things that I love about Scripture, I love how God just reminds us of the immense control, is that anytime he points out an issue, we always see a hopeful solution. And so I wanted to bring that to us today. So what are two things that as I've been meditating and just contemplating and taking a moment to slow down my mind? Because I will also tell you this, I think it's a terrible idea to rush to speak. So make sure that we all have that, because when we rush to speak, oftentimes we haven't allowed God to mold us and to shape our thinking from what he wants to be. So as a believer, don't be too quick. But here's what we have today for two things that God has been showing me, and I trust that he can to you as well. The first thing is this, is that we have to remember that we live in an evil world. But as Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 reminds us, and this is, by the way, the passage that's talking about the armor of God. We need to remember, before we put on the armor, who the battle is actually against. And we see that Paul reminds us of that very clearly in verse 12, where he says, "For we do not wrestle," or if you have the NIV, "we do not battle, we do not fight against flesh and blood." It's not a human fight, but we wrestle against the rulers, the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. God is reminding us very quickly that evil was not what humanity was created for. As a matter of fact, evil was something that was a rejection of God that was brought here because of sin. And because sin plagues this world, there is evil everywhere. And friends, that is nothing new. There's always been evil. There's always been hatred and violence. But what we have to remember, because I think when we see all these tragedies and terrible things happening, we want to take it out on people. Well, friends, that's not God's calling for us. Our fight is against evil and darkness itself. And the second part that God reminded me of came from Romans 10, where he reminds me so clearly of how we're supposed to fight this battle. How are we supposed to fight this battle? What's the solution to all of these problems? And friends, I just want to read to you one of the most powerful passages, starting in Romans 10, verse 9, one of the most famous passages in my mind on this Romans road as well. "If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. For Scripture says, everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for For the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. And here's the most incredible verse. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Jesus is telling us that the solution to the issue in the world today is the gospel. We need to be a gospel people who have been so engaged by the grace and the love and the compassion and the mercy and the salvation of the forgiveness of sins that comes through Jesus. Friends, that is the only solution to a darkened heart. Jesus wants to change hearts. But what is our role in that? For now, Paul asks a question in verse 14. How then will they call on him in whom they've not believed? And how are they to believe in him, of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. Friends, we need to be gospel-proclaiming, Christ-loving people in an age that seems to want to try to silence that of all things. And so I wanted to challenge you with this. Have you taken your eyes off the main thing that Jesus has called us as believers to do? Some of you might be watching this today and saying, I'm not a believer in Jesus yet. My encouragement to you would be to ask him why you should, because he will show you of why he has come to save, he's come to heal, he's come to forgive, he's come to love. But friends, is the gospel, is Christ the paramount thing in your life? If so, will you share it with a world that is desperate to hear it? Friends, that's what the Lord's been putting on me in this last week as I've taken a moment to breathe and to think. May he place it on you as well. Have a great day.